Merhaba, hepiniz tekrar hoş geldiniz. Başlamadan önce simültane tercüme için kulaklıklarınızı temin edebileceğinizi tekrar hatırlatalım. Servis personelinden rica edebilirsiniz, sizlere ulaştırabilirler. For simultaneous translation, you may ask for the headset to the waiters. They will be assisting you. Ben sizlere kendimi tanıtayım. İsmim Ceren Süngü. Yaklaşık 10 senedir Doluca, Moet Hennessy gibi şarap bazlı firmalarımızda pazarlama ve eğitim departmanlarında çalışıyordum. Şimdi kendi şirketimde tecrübemi birleştirdim ve Gusto Bar'a bana bugün burada fırsat verdiği için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sizlerle beraber 179 tane farklı şarabın yukarıda tadıldığı ve üzüm bazlı ilk kez Türkiye'de tadıldığı bir organizasyon yapıyoruz aslında burada. Bugün de Master Class'ta 74 tane farklı şarap arasından 13 tane şarabımızı seçtiler. Bugün burada birlikte bu 13 şarabı tadıyor olacağız ama ben tekrar hem Zalto kadehlerini hem Gusto Bar'ın kurucusu olan Korevin'i Türkiye'ye getiren Taner Öğütoğlu'na teşekkür ediyorum ve sözü fazla uzatmadan Bay Ronan ve İsa Bal'a sözleri bırakıyorum. Sizlere de keyifli tadımlar diliyorum.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Have you had a good tasting this morning? Yes? A bit more enthusiasm. Have you had a good tasting? Fantastic. Thank you. So thank you very much for your warm welcome to Turkey. This is my third time back. It's always a great pleasure to come. It's a lovely city, so it's always a great pleasure to be here. So we've already been working quite hard this morning, myself and Isa. We've been through about 80 wines, and we've chosen our top favourites. So here they are. So we're going to share these with you. A mixture of some international varieties and a mixture of some Turkish varieties. For me, this is quite a discovery because there's a lot of these varieties that I've never tried before. But, you know, we really like the wines and there's a couple of varieties that I'm very excited about. I think my Turkish is not very good, so please apologize in advance for any pronunciation, which is terrible. I think when you're trying to sell Turkish wines abroad to foreign markets, I think initially you're at a really bad disadvantage because the names can be quite hard to pronounce. They're becoming quite difficult for people to understand. It's much easier to sell things like Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's a bit boring. You know, I think one of the strongest assets that you've got are your own grape varieties, your own indigenous grape varieties. It kind of makes it difficult to begin with to get into a market with your own grape varieties that are hard to pronounce. But once you're in there and you're established, it's your greatest asset because it makes you really unique. If you look at things like the success that the Greeks have had, am I allowed to mention the Greeks? Yeah. Is that okay? All right, okay. If you look at the success that the Greeks have had in places like America with Assyrtiko, you know, that grape variety has gone absolutely crazy in America. Every wine bar you go into New York is serving Assyrtiko by the glass. And if you could get one of your indigenous grape varieties on a similar thing, get people really excited about it, I think that you've got some great indigenous varieties. So,
yeah, I think one thing I like to add is that we have tasted these wines, and initially the idea was to select just 10 wines between us and show 10 wines. But we had a difficulty in deciding which wine to leave out and things like that. There could have been 3-4 other wines that we could have shown you today. But unfortunately, due to time constrictions and things like that, we had to keep it to, well, lucky 13, I guess. So we are going to go through these wines, and I think Ronan is going to start talking about the first 2 wines. And we were both very enthusiastic about both of these wines.
yeah. Yeah, so if you want to, as we're talking, please taste the wines. Have you tried both the first 2 wines? So we have the Emir, and then we have the Narinjay. And again, brand new varieties for me. I've never tried them before. I think that the Emir to start with, I think is a really beautiful, very fine variety. Sometimes when you get varieties that are totally unadorned, this seems to have no oak to it, doesn't seem like it's gone through its malolactic, so it's just a really pure expression of the grape. And it's quite complex, it's quite a textured wine, has a lovely minerality, a lovely acidity. I thought it had a really kind of nice saline kind of characteristic to it, almost like an iodine kind of characteristic to it. That with something like fresh oysters, the acidity in it, I think would be a really interesting wine. Yeah. So I think when you can see very complex grape varieties like that, they're, like I say, are really kind of unadorned, there's no oak, there's no malolactic, they're just very, very pure, and they come out tasting like this. I mean, I think it's a delicious grape variety. So, and again, nothing I've ever tried before. I've never tried Emir before.
Yeah, I think one of the best books I have ever read on how to taste wine or wine tasting was written by a quasi-Australian wine critic, wine lover, Len Evans, who was born in Wales in UK, but emigrated to Australia and become one of the most respected palates of that country. And in his lifetime, he has tasted some amazing wine, and he is known for his exuberance and outgoing personality. And his book, I remember he opens it with a lifetime spent in wine fits in 42 pages, and that 42 pages was written on how to taste wine. Aside from that, in one of his talks, he goes, "No wood, no good." That's one part I don't necessarily agree with him, because you really don't have to have wood in wine to make it beautiful. I think this is a great example of variety without really being affected by new oak. And it's fresh, it's crisp, it's mineral, dry, just everything is in perfect balance. I think for me personally, balance would be the key word I would look in any wine.
Yeah, it's very classy in its kind of minimalist style. I think it would be interesting to see this grape variety made a bit like Albarino, so maybe a bit more phenolic, maybe with a bit more skin contact to it, give it a bit more textural character. But yeah, a very good wine. So yeah. Any comments on the first wine? Does anyone know is there any winemakers here that work with Emir? No? How many winemakers are here, by the way? Nobody? No winemakers here. Oh, good. We can say anything then. We can say whatever we like.
No, there are winemakers, I think, here. Well, yeah, I can see one there.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So we'll move on. Yes.
I'm Australian,
Okay.
so for me, I've lived in Turkey for 8 years.
Okay.
And Emir, to me, I try and educate people about Turkish wine.
Okay.
And Emir is
Is a dry wine, but not too dry.
Okay.
So sometimes you have to simulate the wines or the grapes from Turkey with the international grapes as well.
Okay.
So, you know, the Chardonnay grape of Turkey is really Narinje, but it's not Chardonnay.
Okay.
It's not. But you have to try and make comparisons between the wine, the grapes from different countries, because when people don't know about Turkish grapes, it's very difficult to say this is blah blah, but you have to make a comparison.
Yeah.
So I think the Emir grape is very fresh. It's like the Cabernet Sauvignon, or Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, sorry, but it's not as fruity.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a mix between the Riesling and the, Sauvignon Blanc grape varieties, but it's not like either.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult when you take the Turkish indigenous grapes for their value.
Yeah.
You have to compare them because, of course, the Turkish indigenous grapes are not so well known. So I think you have to think about it like that.
Yeah, well, I think, like I was saying earlier, I think that initially makes it difficult to understand the wines, but then you also start with a complete blank canvas to start with. If you start making Chardonnay, people are obviously going to compare that to Burgundy. If you start making Cabernet Sauvignon, people are going to compare that to Bordeaux. So they're going to get a glass of your Cabernet Sauvignon and think, it's not really like Bordeaux though, is it? But if you get a glass of Emir, they're going to not have any kind of preconceived ideas about what it's going to be. So they just taste it barely on the quality of the wine itself, which I think is a disadvantage because it means that they're probably a bit reluctant to taste it initially, but probably when they do, they'll like it.
I think maybe using adjectives like fresh and crisp
Yeah.
help more than comparing it to another grape, because it's not like another grape.
Yeah.
It's similar,
Yeah.
but it's like distinct. So
Yeah.
of course it needs to have these, adjectives to help describe it for people to understand what it really is like.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's a very nice grape. I mean, it reminds me of Albarino, which is kind of thought to be related to Riesling, so it's in that
Although that's a
category.
bit
It reminds me
sweeter.
of Bicol.
Of what?
Bicol.
Okay, Bicol. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so moving on to the second wine, so then moving on to the Narinje. This production is only 600 bottles, so it's only really 2 barriques. So very, very small production of this wine. I'm not sure if I'd really say putting it in clear bottles is a good idea. I think you can have a bit of a chance of some oxidization through light in clear bottles. So I probably not my favorite thing to see white wine in clear bottles. But the thing is, why I really like this wine, again, it's a brand new kind of wine for me. What I really liked is it has that slightly orange flower characteristic. It's sort of a high terpene grape variety. It's kind of in the same characteristics of things like Muscat and Gewürztraminer, Torrontés, if you know Argentine Torrontés. It's kind of up there like that. Has a strong terpene character in it called linalool, and that gives you that orangey kind of floral characteristic to it. So I think it's quite a broad wine. It's quite textured, so it's quite rich when it hits the palate, but then on the back of the palate, it goes very, very mineral and it has a nice high acidity. I think that would be a really good wine to have with food.
Yeah, I think in terms of this Narinje, when we were tasting this, we were wondering whether or not this had another grape variety in it. So if Oluş is here, Oluş can tell us if there is another variety in this. But as far as we are concerned here, I think it's just Narinje. And it's just a small quantity. I think there is about only 600 bottles of it, if that's right. So it is the aromatic structure of this wine and the palate, the balance thing again. It was really very pleasant. And it's nice to see such a small production wine doing so well. So we were very happy with this, and I think this is a lovely wine.
Yeah, and I think something like a cream cheese, something like that, I think that would go really well with it. The harder cheeses, I think things like fish with cream, fish with butter sauces, something along those, maybe with a hollandaise or something like that, I think it would work really well.
And I am sure many of you is aware with the problems Narinje at large facing in this country, because it's a grape variety that's suffering, and at some instances the grower gets more money for the leaves of this variety than the actual fruit. So it really is hard to maintain this variety, but it really deserves to be kept and make sure that it's looked after well, because it's our own and it's a grape variety that has got a huge potential to prove itself in any wine lover's cellar. So overall, I think these first two grape varieties, Narinje and Emir, we need to look after them and we need to maybe grow more of them. I think they are brilliant varieties.
Yeah, for definite. Yeah, both very nice. Yeah, any comments on the Narinje?
Though it's very elegant, very balanced, but it's very clear on the nose, actually.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, what I really like about this wine is the finish and that very long kind of, again, that salty saline kind of. I mean, I tasted it 2 minutes ago, and I can still taste it quite distinctly. So I think it's got a great length to it. So
We believe that Narinje has a great aging potential as well.
Okay.
I mean, Cavac Ledere Prestige series, for example, are showing some great depth.
yeah.
And as Isa said, it is a great grape, actually.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to the third wine, our only non-Turkish wine in the lineup. I think we did have.
It's the Chardonnay.
Oh, sorry, it's Chardonnay. Okay, well, go on, then you go for it.
Sorry. So this, there was a few Chardonnay on the tasting, and we liked again the clever use of the oak in this. And when you look at the technical sheet, what you had was 50% barrel fermentation and 50% in stainless steel. And I believe it comes from several plots that this winery has, Çamlıca has. And we liked its sort of, again, that slight lean structure with beautiful balance of the alcohol acidity that is quite refreshing. And the oak is not dominating the wine. It's very well balanced, and it's in a very nice harmony. And as far as the Chardonnay is concerned, I think it's more of an old world Chardonnay than new world. Would you not say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think all across the world now they're making Chardonnay more in this style. So you can see it's got some oak to it, not a huge amount of oak. It's gone through partial malolactic, I would imagine, probably not 100% malolactic, but it's made in a slightly reductive style that's giving you that aroma a bit like a struck match or something like that. So slightly sulfurous style. So Chardonnays, they're making like that all over the world. I think just the world's turned away from those big, oaky, buttery, 100% malolactic styles of Chardonnay and going for this much more flintier mineral style, which I think this is really good.
Yeah. And Oluş is here, who is the producer of the Narince there.
Okay.
Oluş, we had a couple of questions for you. One of them was, is that 100% Narince? Is that 100% Narince? Perfect. And the oak that you fermented in, is it new or old oak? New oak. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So Oluş from Minoluş.
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, but I think the Chardonnay for me, I find that probably similar to something like a Puligny Montrachet. So that high acid, very lean, very elegant, great length to it, and really kind of a very subtle use of oak. So oak should be kind of like, without sounding too sexist, oak should be like a little bit of makeup on a pretty woman. If you get too much makeup, it looks really bad. So just a subtle bit of makeup, I think that's what it should be like. And I think this pulls it off really well.
I think so. I think it's a terrific Chardonnay, and hope to see more of this and more like this. And moving on, the next grape variety. Before I say anything else about this grape variety, let's say this variety and I don't always get on very well. And it's Chenin Blanc, originally from Loire Valley, around Vouvray, Anjou, Saumur, this area. And it's one of those varieties that's also doing quite well in South Africa as a grape variety, and there's large plantation in South Africa as well. But coming back to Loire Valley, Vouvray, tufa soils, so quite easy to work with, very sort of, that's the classic soil you get for this variety. Chenin tends to have always very high refreshing acidity, and it does tend to have aromatic structure ranging from, I have heard it described, wet wools, bruised apples, wet dogs, all these sort of aromatic descriptors. And I think bruised apple really fits into this instance. You can also get that chalky minerality coming through as well. But one of the main thing about this variety, this particular wine, is that it has got that sort of sugar, residual sugar left in it. So it's a wine, maybe if you are drinking on its own, it may tire you. However, paired with, I don't know, like a goat cheese or a light salad with sort of high acid escabeche or something like that, that could work quite well.
Yeah, and Chenin Blanc is quite. Chenin Blanc's a quite adaptable grape variety. In the Loire, they make it into sparkling wine, into dry wine, demi-sec wine, and then also dessert wine. It's quite a thin-skinned variety that gets affected by botrytis quite easily. So you get that botrytis characteristic on it. And really, depending on the vintage, and this is what, 2015, was it 15? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 2015. 15, it says 15 on the bottle. 2015, good vintage, so nice warm vintage. So often when they're doing that, they will have a little bit of residual sugar in the wines. So I think I think occasionally to have wines like this are really interesting with food. You often find that the sugar will tone down very spicy types of food, so balance that sort of thing off. So I think that this is probably not the kind of wine that I'd want to drink every day, but I think it's a good thing to have if you're in a restaurant or in a hotel, wherever, to have it for an occasion where it's going to match with something really well. I think with cheese it'll match really well as well, and that big acidity with that little bit of residual sugar is in good balance. Like Isa said, Vouvray and Chenin Blanc from the Loire often smells of that bruised apple kind of characteristic. If you take an apple and bang it on the table and start to see a big bruise develop and come back, smell it after 10 minutes, you get that real characteristic of oxidized apple. And that's pretty much what Vouvray is like. I would imagine this is aged in oak barrels, probably old oak barrels, and just allowed to oxidize quite a lot, so giving it that quite distinctive characteristic. So do people like the residual sugar in this or not like it? No. No? Hands up if you like residual sugar. A few. Okay. Yeah, okay.
I think when it comes to liking certain type of taste, it is actually quite common. We do like sugar. It's when we taste, we don't always admit it, but we have a tendency to like sweeter things than totally sugarless dry things. And that's sometimes in the wine, there is this sort of fashion, if you like. Everyone says, oh, I don't like sweet wine. But actually, you know, most of us do.
Do people here drink German Riesling? Do you like German Riesling from the Mosel? Yeah, I think anyone that likes wine pretty much likes German Riesling. And the thing is that what you need to have, if you've got that residual sugar, you need big acidity. So you need very, very big acidity. And it means that the wine doesn't become cloying or heavy. The palate's immediately cleansed once you swallow it because of that acidity. So as long as you've got the high acid, I think the residual sugar is totally in balance.
Right. I think on to our next wine, which is the Prestige Kalecik Karası from Kavaklıdere, 2011 vintage. And I think there is probably a lot of people in this room who can talk about Kalecik Karası a lot more than I can. So you all probably have tasted either this wine or something along this wine. And there were a couple of the Kalecik Karası on our tasting that we went back and tasted again, and at the end we decided on this. We like this sort of subtleness. We like this flavor profile. We like the structure that the wine presented, and it's quite soft tannins, ripe tannins, with right amount of acidity. And I think it's good time to drink this now.
Yeah, the next couple of red wines that we've chosen are in a similar vein. So I think they're usually the sort of very bright cherry kind of red fruit styles. So maybe sort of raspberry notes, cranberry, cherry kind of styles to them. Generally quite low on oak, quite high in acidity, and quite kind of pure fruit to them. So they're kind of in that Pinot Noir, Gamay sort of style. And I think we definitely see more and more all over the world, people really beginning to appreciate that. I think Beaujolais had a big revival recently. I think Beaujolais is becoming really popular now. It's getting to the point where 10 years ago you could buy Cru Beaujolais for next to nothing, and nowadays they're starting to get really expensive because they are being very popular. And I think that's just the world moving away from high oak, high alcohol, and just going for very, very pure fruit flavors. And I think the next couple of wines really do show that.
Yeah. And I'm going to move on to next one, the Papaz Karası. Papaz Karası, we have started to see pure varietal of Papaz Karası in the last few years. Different producers are making them. We were really excited and pleased with this particular one. And this one has no oak aging. It's based purely on the grape variety and reflects the winemaking, which is, I think, quite gentle and respectful to the variety. It presented itself with wonderful fruit structure. It has got a very cleansing, refreshing acidity, which makes the wine very enjoyable. And we really enjoy this wine, and I think it's terrific value for what it is as well. Yeah. It's a really well-made wine, and yeah, based on more fruitiness rather than structure and power. But it's I think it's fantastic wine.
Yeah. I agree. Like I say, I mean, it's got that purple color. It's a bit like sort of Gamay sort of style. But yeah, just very, I think it's very light. It's very easy to drink. And it's just kind of all about really ripe, pure fruit. And you can tell it's got a slightly jammy characteristic as well. So very ripe, very pure fruit.
Any comments on the Papas Karası here? Did anyone have this wine before? I don't think so. No. Yeah, we haven't had it before either. It's the first time ever we tasted it today, and it's very well done.
Even though it's quite delicate wine, I think it would go really well with food because of the structure. I think it's got quite grippy tannin. It's got really nice acidity. So I think with things like charcuterie, cold meat, sliced sausage, with fattiness in them, I think they would go really well. With things like game, things like pigeon, that sort of thing, I think it would be a really nice combination. Does anyone here, any of the winemakers work with this grape variety? Again, this is a brand new grape variety for me. I've never heard of this. Yes, is that a hand coming up there? Okay. You work with this grape variety? Ah, okay. Okay. Stand up and give us a wave. Yeah. And this wine is 100% this variety? There's nothing else in there? Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. Is it a common variety here?
But I think in the Thrace, part of Bulgaria and Greece, yes. And some of the islands possibly. Okay. But not necessarily in the Anatolian part of Turkey, no. The vineyards, could you tell us how old are the vineyards? $15 years. So it's new plantation. That's good.
And why was this grape variety chosen? Why was this grape variety chosen to plant? Because of the soils? Why did the lady choose to plant this variety in her area? Okay, all right, okay.
We move on to next one. Another variety, Karasakız. And I have always had interesting tasting with this variety. And this one was quite interesting as well. And one of the main differences I found on this one, it's volatile acidity. It was a little bit higher than most of these wines here, but it was still at a level that add complexity, add a bit more dimension to the wine.
For me, this wine had a very kind of a fresh, herbaceous character, a bit like sage leaves, so chopped sage leaves, with a very kind of distinctive cherry kernel character. It's kind of almost like a very light style of Sangiovese. But pale color, but it has a lot of structure to it. It has, again, that bright acidity and those good grippy tannins to it. I think it's a really good food wine.
Does everybody have the next wine? The one after Karasakız. Everyone has it? Okay, because we are going to start to talk about that soon. But Karasakız, I think we have people from Sula. Can we hear something from you?
Hi, I am Elçin Akinan from Suvla. This is our first reserve vintage from Karasakız variety. It's very easy to drink and it's a little bit rustic wine. It's aged in oak barrels for 12 months, but partially, not complete. Do you have a question?
And it's a monosepage.
Yeah, monosepage, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Marcela.
Yeah, okay, so moving on to the next. So we've gone through those sort of very sort of light, pale-coloured wines, and we're moving on to some bit darker wines. I think one thing that we were looking for with these sort of darker style wines was not too much oak being used. Sometimes when you get these dark colored wines that are naturally quite high in tannin, if they're put into too much new oak, unless there's a lot of fruit there, what happens is, even though they're quite attractive on the nose and on the palate, on the back end of the palate, the wood tannins and the tannins of the grape really dry the wines out. So that was one thing that we didn't particularly like, that we found in some of the wines, but I think that these ones are not showing that. But so moving to the next one is Marcelin. So Marcelin is a grape variety that's a crossing of Grenache and Cabernet Sauvignon, developed down in the south of France, down the sort of close to kind of Toulouse area, back in the 1960s. So it's a relatively young type of cross. But I think that this wine's showing a really intense, very pretty floral characteristic on the nose. It's got a lot of that kind of dark sour cherry, cranberry, and a really pretty purple flower, violet kind of characteristic to it.
The tea leaf character.
Tea leaf as well, yeah. And the fruit's quite kind of rounded, quite jammy, quite full-bodied. It's a very generous wine, but again, it just has that nice acidity to it, and it has that nice length to it. A little bit kind of a sourness to it, which I think really matches well with that slightly jammy, sweet fruit characteristic that you're getting as well. So yeah, nice wine. Okay.
Next one.
Yeah.
So we move on to next one, which is the Tura Öküz Gözü. And with the Öküz Gözü, as you know, it is probably the one variety that we have got, and we are trying to, or starting to understand now what it likes, what it doesn't like, etc. And it's a bit like, if you like, it's a bit like the raki brand. You know, when you are a raki drinker, you tend to have your own favorite brand. And I think with Öküz Gözü as well, when you like your Öküz Gözü, you tend to like your particular style of Öküz Gözü. So I'm sure amongst you there are people who will say, oh, stylistically that's not my favorite one. But again, that's what we like, but that's what we enjoyed. It's quite shouldered. It has got quite depth of fruit. It has got ripeness of it, rich, complex. It's certainly not a simple wine. It has got quite a lot going for it. Have we got anyone from Doluca here or not? Okay, as far as we are aware, these fruits are from Denizli as well, so they are not from the east.
Like I say, some of these varieties are new to me. This is probably the only Turkish variety that I know, which is quite well known in London. But yeah, delicious variety. For me, it has like a lovely kind of very meaty characteristic on the back. Oh, are you the winemaker? No, okay.
About the Öküz Gözü. What made you choose this Öküz Gözü in favor of the others? What made it stand out compared to the other ones?
I think for me it was the purity. I didn't think it was too heavily oaked. I thought that it had good balance. It had that sweetness to it. It had that slight meaty, kind of gamey character on the back of the palate. I think with kind of like a steak or something like that that's cooked more on the bloody side, I think it would be really nice. It's got really juicy acidity, good fruit, and nice tannins to it. So I think that it was just a very pure expression that really was very balanced all the way through, right to the finish. So.
And also, it's made, I think, slightly reductive in the way it's made, and that reduction is managed very well. Sometimes with the wrong type of reduction, you can destroy your wine. But reduction here is very smartly done. It just disappeared within like minutes in the glass. And then you can see the fruit coming out, and it was very well made. It's quite enjoyable, actually.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I know winemakers here, I'm sure a lot of you are working with this variety. How is it in the vineyard? Is it an easy variety to grow? Is it high yielding, low yielding? Do you know?
It can be high yielding, I think.
Yeah. But you guys, you'll know this variety much more than myself. And what do you think of this particular one? Do you like to see it more heavily full-bodied, or do you like to see it with more oak, or do you like to see it blended, or how do you like this variety?
Okay, Stefan prefers it less.
Unfortunately, I know the guy who produced that wine, and he's not in Turkey anymore.
Okay.
And at the time when the wine was released, I thought it was a great example of a közgöző, a rather concentrated style that you picked.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, a great clean wine.
Yeah.
But within the wines that we tasted today, I personally liked more smoother, lighter, easygoing version of it.
Okay. Okay.
But again, I mean, like narince, a közgöző is one of my personally favorite Turkish grapes, so I would not say anything wrong about it.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, and we move on to Acıkara from Likya Winery 2014. And I have been sort of tasting these wines from the first vintage on. And I was very pleased to see when it was first made, I think it was in Izmir, I tasted the first sort of example of this variety. Here you have got something. If this producer didn't make this wine, this variety would have not existed anymore. So he has actually revived a grape variety that was otherwise destined to be lost and probably never to come back. So for that effort alone, I think it's a wine that is worth scrutinizing closely, tasting closely. And it's a wine, I have to admit, it's not a flattering wine. It's not going to compliment you. It's not going to compliment the drinker. Drinker has to work. Drinker has to make an effort to appreciate and understand the wine. It's a wine, it kind of says, this is what I am. You like it? Fine. You don't like it? That's also fine. It's quite rich, full, very deep colored, has got a great acidity. It's in fact one of the best acidity balance in this lineup. And also the location it comes from, Elmalı, which is quite high up a plateau. And I think November this year they had quite a lot of snow there. So it's a very interesting area, and it's a wine that I think has big potentials in the coming years as well.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, very interesting wine. Very interesting, great variety. So whereabouts in Turkey is this grown?
Southern Turkey, on Mediterranean highlands, if you like. Is
Okay.
Burak here? He's upstairs. Okay, fine. Don't worry. I think, do we have? 5, 10. We have 3 more wines, don't we?
Yeah.
Have you all have those 3 wines? No. Okay. Can we please get the last 3 wines served to people? Can we get the last 3 wines served to the people, please? Thank you.
So we need to empty the first 3 wines?
Can you please empty your 3 white wine glasses? You have got 3 more wines coming to taste. You can either empty them to your spittoons or you can drink them.
Yeah, the narinja is lovely, isn't it?
It's good.
It's really good.
You talk about this one?
Yeah.
You kick it off anyway.
So which one is that? So the next wine that's being poured is the Barbare. So it's the Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blend. Obviously the classic blend from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And if you're down in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, I mean, this wine is 15% alcohol, which comes from the Grenache. Grenache is a grape variety, tends to be, when it's grown in a warm climate, can be really sweet. It's usually quite low in alcohol, it's usually quite low in acid, it's usually quite low in tannins, and it's usually quite high in alcohol. So to drink Grenache on its own is not a very pleasant wine at all. It doesn't have an awful lot of structure to it. It's quite jammy, quite sweet, and quite hot. Which is why classically in Châteauneuf-du-Pape they would blend it with some Syrah. The Syrah would add tannin to it, so it'd bring the tannin up in the Grenache. It would lower the alcohol slightly. It would give it a bit more structure. And whereas your Grenache will give you that jammy, sweet red fruit and white pepper, the Syrah would bring you more black pepper, and bring more dark fruits. So it's a kind of a classic French blend, which really kind of shows why it works so well, because one variety really complements or backs up maybe as another variety is lacking in things. So, and then that touch of Mourvedre as well gives it a slightly rustic characteristic to it. And I think when you have this wine, and when we have it blind, we knew it was a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre, but all of that blend, I think, really kind of seamlessly integrates. It doesn't taste like three grape varieties. Sometimes you can get blends and really they all kind of stick out and they don't harmonize at all. But I think this is a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre blend that all the elements come together and make it overall a really interesting, complete wine.
On that one, we were both actually in the opinion that this wine was from Châteauneuf-du-Pape rather than from Turkey. So we did think this was Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And I think if I had to add a couple of things what Ronan said in terms of Grenache and this blend, Grenache as a grape variety, along with probably Zinfandel, you begin to see the best of this variety once the vineyard hits 50, 60 year old. So the young Grenache wines can be quite boring and shallow, whereas if the wines get older in the vineyard, you then start to see some really interesting and profound characters of this variety. The other one is that I always prefer, that's my personal preference though, I always prefer Grenache, Mourvedre, Syrah or similar blends in old oak rather than new.
Yeah.
I think they respond to that, and they respond to that gentle oxidation that they get from old oak as well quite nicely. But again, it's a combination of things. You know, by changing one thing, you can change the character of wine. It's that vineyard age, vineyard husbandry, if you like, and then looking at how you make the wine, the practices, ends up making what you have in the glass. But it is a good example of it, and definitely, I think, put amongst the Châteauneuf-du-Papes of Southern Rhone, it would be hard to pick.
Yeah, it's got a lot of characteristics like that, so it's a very good expression of those three grape varieties. Do people know this vineyard? Is it a hot climate vineyard? Is it? It's warm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the alcohol is 15%. You can taste that hot Grenache. Probably if it didn't have Grenache, Syrah and Mourvedre blended. Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Would you consider it is reflecting his style as well? Xavier Vignon is making it, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Okay.
I think you can never discount the hand that makes the wine. It is a very important part of the end result. Because terroir, when we talk about terroir, some people not necessarily involve the person or the persons who is making the wine. For me, persons is very important part of that terroir. You take the people, replace it with other people, you end up with something totally different. So,
if he's used to making Grenache in a warm climate, he probably knows that the alcohol levels can be up 16.5%. So he's got to blend something in to bring that alcohol down and give it more structure. So he's just followed the classic formula, really.
Yeah.
So yeah.
now I think moving on to next wine, which is Carnas Vineyards Shiraz 2015. I must admit this is new for me. I don't think I have. Have you tasted this, Ayhan Bey? Have you tasted this before? You did. Okay. Okay. Oh, you don't have it yet.
Well, it's interesting to see, you know, traveling all over the world, seeing how many people grow Cabernet Sauvignon, and I think that people should be getting rid of some of the Cabernet and planting more Syrah, to be honest. It would be my opinion. I think Cabernet is often grown because people think it's a commercial variety and that consumers know about it and they'll buy it, but it's often grown in the wrong areas. And sometimes Cabernet is a late ripening variety, and it doesn't like to be in a cool climate. And when you get cool climate Cabernet and it comes out all green and pyrazine-like, and it's done as and Cabernet often has a very hollow mid-palate, so it really needs to be blended with something. But I think people get so infatuated with things like Bordeaux that they think, what grape variety am I going to grow? Let's grow Cabernet and let's make a great wine like Bordeaux. But it's great in Bordeaux for the climate and the region that it's grown in. And it's difficult sometimes to replicate that. And I think that the world could definitely do with less Cabernet Sauvignon. We had quite a few Cabernet Sauvignons on this tasting, and a lot of them were a bit green and a bit dried out, whether that's because of the pyrazine character and you know, you can't grow Cabernet at high altitude in cool climate vineyards because the tannins just don't ripen.
Yeah. I think with regards to Cabernets, in terms of Cabernets, and I was actually surprised that we haven't seen any today here on their pure form. In terms of Cabernet grape variety concerned in this country, I think Cabernet Franc certainly adapted itself much better than Cabernet Sauvignon did. And Cabernet Sauvignons we had today were often blended with another variety or two or three or more varieties. And it has got quite a wide spectrum of growing areas. Cabernet and Chardonnay pretty much take a cutting from these two varieties, planted in Mars, it's gonna grow in Mars. It will grow anywhere, but it's not gonna make good wine everywhere. That's the thing, and it is difficult. It has got a lot of different characteristics. From time to time, I do taste some very good Cabernet Sauvignons from Turkey, but in this instance, I think these were, to us at least, more interesting.
Yeah.
And the next wine that is being poured to you right now, which is the Shiraz from Karnas Vineyards. There were a couple of Shirazes we were sort of debating as to which one put it forward.
Yep,
and one was slightly lighter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lighter and a bit more sort of more Ron-like, if you like. But this one had the richness, but it also has quite a good varietal character. It's got quite nice spiciness, the pepperiness is there, mintiness is there, the fruit tannin structure is very nice, and there is a lovely sort of green undertones that is not ripeness related, I don't think. It's just a very well balanced, and it's got quite a sort of good balance for what it is.
Yeah, and I think you can grow Syrah in a warmer climate. I think Syrah grows really well close to the sea. So if you're growing it in a warm climate but close to the sea where you're going to get a lot of that cool breeze coming in, you're going to get ripe fruit, but you're going to retain a lot of acidity to it. And I think that this kind of wine shows that. I'm not exactly sure where it's grown, but it has that.
It's southwest of Turkey,
Okay.
by not far from the sea.
Okay.
But I think it is very well made. It is modern. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a very traditional style of winemaking, but certainly it has got the grape variety, very well balanced, and it's just a beautiful Shiraz, actually.
And it spends 12 months in wood, but I mean, you really can't see the wood. So whether that's new wood or old wood, I'm not sure. I don't think it's new wood. I've got the winemaker at the back here. So, okay.
Have you got the winemaker here? Okay, can we hear from you? Tell us where you are. Just tell us where your winery is, where you are located.
Bodrum.
Bodrum, where in Bodrum?
Bodrum Karaova.
Harika.
Karya Ovası.
Excuse me.
So yes, we have like a new oak as well, and we
Okay.
have like second and third year barrels. So try to find the balance of the oak.
Yeah.
And I think, as you well mentioned, we have like this herbous character. I mean, this kind from these cool nights is from
Okay.
Martin side.
Yeah.
I mean, that make difference from Shiraz from maybe Güney or center of
Okay.
Turkey as
You
well.
get a
So-
big diurnal temperature shift between
Yeah,
night
we
and
have,
daytime.
and maybe especially with the winds as well. They
Yeah.
allow this to keep this freshness in the
Yeah.
grapes. It's hot climate, but we have this chance of the maritime cool wind as well, and just try to find the balance and the elegance.
Yeah. And how old are the vines?
So they are now about 8 years.
Okay. And why did you choose to plant Syrah instead of Cabernet Sauvignon?
So, well, that was a decision. It was take. Maybe Selvan can
Okay.
answer that.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, good job.
You enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Teşekkürler.
Thank you.
Last one.
Last one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have
Oh,
it.
you don't have it here.
Thank you. Don't think anyone else has had it either.
They are
It's been
just
pulled
getting
now.
out.
Okay. So moving to the last variety, you know, we did have a kind of a Cabernet Sauvignon blend. So this is Cabernet Merlot and Syrah. And there were quite a lot of Cabernets on the lineup. Like I say, it probably sounds like I really hate Cabernet. I don't hate Cabernet, but I think it's a tricky one to grow. But this was really nice. We liked this one because it had a kind of a freshness to the nose, a kind of a graphite-y pencil shaving characteristic to it. I think it's got really well integrated oak to it. I think that Syrah gives it an extra dimension, which is really good. And overall, quite a meaty, quite balanced, just really enjoyable glass of wine. I think it was very classy, very elegant, very refined.
It's quite rich, full. The tannins are very ripe. And I have to admit, in terms of when it comes to volatile acidity in wine, people have different reactions to it. Some people really object to it, and some people like it. I actually like it. And my threshold for volatile acidity in most wine is probably higher than Ronan's or somebody else's in this room. And I've got some friends that we taste quite often together here. They can tell that as well. I often like volatile acidity in wine. And so that I think that little bit of volatile acidity there is actually adding to the wine, making it a bit more complex. And it's got that soft tannic structure, which is also very nice.
Yeah. I mean, if you like Italian wines, then you'll like volatile acidity, because there's a lot of Barolo, Piemontese wines and Tuscan wines have volatile acidity. But yeah.
So that brings us to the end of our selection. And I do hope you enjoyed the wines. I do hope we had some agreements and disagreements. They are both equally welcomed. And yeah, if anyone has any question or comment,
any
we would
comments
be
about the
more
wine?
than happy to hear.
Yeah, does anyone disagree with the wines? Does anyone like to see more oak, more alcohol, less acidity, more Cabernet? Any comments? We did have a very unusual blend. Somebody was obviously being very resourceful, and they had a Cabernet Merlot Pinot Noir Syrah blend. So they were going for Rhone, Burgundy, and Bordeaux all in one glass, which was quite an ambitious
But it was a
one.
good wine.
Yeah, you like that.
We nearly put that through.
So anyone have any questions or any comments? I think it's really important for us to hear your feedback. It's good as wine professionals together. You're probably not that many of you together in a room at once. So it's all good that you can stand up, give your opinion on indigenous grape varieties or on international varieties. Where do you find the Turkish wine industry going? What would you like to see more of or less of?
Go on, Stefan.
I just wanted to thank you very much first for coming.
Pleasure.
Second, to select those wines. And just say on general, your selection, I think is helping us a lot, because we believe that we need more drinkable wines, in a sense that are more juicy, lighter, fresher, more like dazzling wines, basically.
Yeah.
Some of the ones you selected were pretty bodied. Maybe some of the ripeness were not exactly what I would personally like. But on the overall, the way you perceive those wines and the way you selected these wines is exactly what we need.
Yeah.
We need wines which are drinkable. We need to have wines that we want to have another glass and another glass and another bottle.
Yeah.
We don't want wine that are just going to tire us, and after one bottle, then we're going to move to water.
Yeah.
So for that, I thank you
And
very
sometimes, and it's good to see most winemakers moving away from new oak. It's good for you guys because oak's expensive, and people buying loads and loads of new oak because they think, oh, if I want to make a really good wine, I have to spend a lot of money on oak. Well, you definitely don't, because if you've got ripe fruit, and you should have ripe fruit in a country like Turkey, you've got the sunshine, you've got the weather for it. So if you've got ripe, very pure fruit that's well managed in the vineyard and is coming in really clean, you don't really need to put masses of oak into it. And also, if you're in a warm climate where you've got big tannins, you don't need to be adding more oak tannins to it as well. So
I think, in my opinion, in Turkey, we do have some wonderfully ripe, perfectly balanced fruit. We have problems sometimes to get the best cork, for example, to close the bottles. We have sometimes problem to get the best wood to put the wine in. If you cannot get the highest quality oak, it's nothing to do with paying the money, you get the best quality oak. It doesn't quite work like that. I think Chateau Latour, Chateau Margaux is on one side, and someone else is on the other side. They go there to get the best oak. Guess who is going to bet best oak? So instead of putting it in a substandard oak, I would rather keep it without.
Yeah.
Like in the example of the Papascaras we have seen today, it's no oak and it's perfectly acceptable, beautiful wine.
And I think modern winemaking now is really done in the vineyard. So it's managing the canopy as well, exposing the fruit to sun where it needs to be, not exposing the fruit to the sun where it doesn't need to be. It's getting really healthy fruit. It's doing green harvesting. It's concentrating your berries in the vineyard and doing all your work there. Once you're bringing in healthy, good quality fruit, your job's pretty much done for you. The winemaking part of it is all Mother Nature. That just happens naturally. You just gotta keep an eye on it, really. But I think, modern winemaking is really done in the vineyard, and that's where concentration. That's where you got to concentrate, I think.
But from my end, finally, what I like to also say is that I like you to think back 10, 15 years ago in Turkey. What kind of wines you were drinking? How many varieties did you have? How many styles of wine did you have? So look from 15 years on to today, and you have tasted 100 odd wines upstairs. We have tasted nearly 80 here just this morning, and we could have tasted maybe double that if we wanted to. So we have so much more now. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is some beautiful things happening under the circumstances, and I think the wine industry is doing a great job. It's just that the getting better never stops. We just improve and improve and improve. If you don't improve, the humanity stops. The humanity is based on improving or making better than what everyone else did before us. So that's what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well done. Well done. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Birinci şeyim, biz tabii yukarıda beyazları bugün bütün hepsini tadabilme şansı bulduk. Kırmızı 80 şarap derken şu an şu yanılgıya da düşmeyelim. 79 şarap arasından seçilmiş 13 şaraptan bahsetmiyoruz. Dolayısıyla size önerilen 80 şarap arasından seçilmiş şaraplardan bahsediyoruz.
Each producer has sent in 2 wines to taste for us this morning. So we tasted 2 wines max from each producer. So there are a lot of producers whose certain other wines we haven't tasted. So we have tasted 2 wines from each producer.
Çok bilgilendirici. Şunun için de seçimler için teşekkür ediyorum. İlk defa ben hep Türkiye'deki bütün uluslararası tadımları ilk günden beri takip ediyorum. İlk defa bu kadar seçkide fıçının az tercih edildiği, şarabın meyvemsi yapısının ön plana çıkarıldığı ve üzümün karakteristik özelliklerini yansıtan şarapların seçildiği bir 13 şarap oldu. Bu yüzden de teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you. No, he's just thanking for the selection.
Okay. Good, thank you. No, it was a pleasure to try the wines. Actually, I was very pleased with, I think, the selection that we came up with. I thought there were some nice wines. So, does anyone else have any comments? Like I say, it's not often maybe there's so many industry professionals that get in the room together. So, do you want to have a vent about anything? Do you want to complain about your fellow winemakers, or do you want to pat your fellow winemakers on the back, tell them what a great job you think you're doing, or? They're a very polite crowd.
I still have a question about the Öküzgözü you picked, actually, because as you mentioned, it's coming from Denizli, which is not the indigenous region for it. So what made this wine come up other than the oak? You mentioned the oak as well.
Yeah.
So it's
I think, like I said to the beginning, when we were tasting this wine, Öküzgözü is like drinking rakı or smoking a cigarette. If you smoke a cigarette, you smoke certain type of cigarette. If you drink rakı, you have your brand and you stick to that. You seldom drink a different style. With Öküzgözü, that is my experience with most wine drinkers. They've got a preferred style. I freely admit this is a style of Öküzgözü I prefer. I prefer rich, full, broad Öküzgözü.
Is this as the original style of it, or
to be honest,
as
I don't really
interpretation
care
of
about
it?
it being original or not. It's like I go with what's in my glass, and what's in my glass for me satisfies me, and that's what it is.
I believe it's the most widely planted variety in Turkey, so I think by that nature you're going to get a lot of different styles. I'm sure some people will be making it with a lot of oak, some people will be making it very light in style, so just because of its popularity you're going to get a lot of styles to it. But we had a few on the tasting, but personally that was the one that I liked, because I thought it was just very pure, nicely balanced, not too heavy, but a real concentration of fruit. So
It's also going back to the originality. If we just said we are going to go with original grape varieties from their original regions, I think it's a very noble idea, which is fine. Then we would have lost more than half of the varieties on this table. They would have gone. So the grape varieties, let alone regions within countries, they travel continents, they travel different countries. So it's okay to have Öküzgözü planted in Denizli. It's okay to have Papas Karası maybe one day being planted in Diyarbakır or elsewhere. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as your viticulture is done respecting the nature, respecting the varieties' characteristics, not forcing it to become something different, and also it's as human beings, we emigrate, we travel. So does the grape varieties. So I don't have any animosity towards grape varieties planted in different regions than their original. That's my take on it.
And a second question: how would you position Turkish winemaking in the global markets?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, I think that it's one of those things that's going to be hard to be introduced to, because they're varieties that people don't know. But it's kind of got to go into the right markets where people are fairly open-minded and want to try something different, want to try something unique. And once they start tasting these wines, I think that they'll become fans of them. So I think it's the same thing, like I say, has happened in Greece. It's the same thing that happens in Portugal. Portugal's a very difficult country to understand from a wine point of view.
They speak Russian. I mean, funny language.
But Portugal is a land of blends, so there's lots of different varieties there that you don't see anywhere else in the world. But Portuguese wines do really well. I mean, they're really good value for money wines.
I think Portugal probably now makes some of the most exciting wines in Europe, if not the world. Yeah.
What about the winemaking side of it? How would you compare Turkish winemaking to other countries, regions?
Well, I think I think when we were doing tasting earlier, a lot of the time we said the wines taste very modern, very pure. Yeah, the work in the vineyards is obviously important.
If I have to say anything about winemaking in Turkey, we now know how to manage tannins. We now know how to manage acidity. We now know how to use oak better than we did before. But we are playing it very safe. There is hardly anyone taking risk, bar 1 or 2 producers. The more you take risk, the results can be more exciting, but you can also get bitten. So you can lose your entire crop, or you can end up with something very exciting. You have to try and find new things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.